Welcome to Health Systems CIO's interview with John Houston, Vice President of Information Security and Privacy and Associate Counsel with UPMC. I'm Anthony Guerra, Founder and Editor-in-Chief. John, thanks for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right, very good. John, you want to start off, tell me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Sure. The UPMC is a very large integrated delivery system based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have over 40 hospitals. I forget the exact revenue, but it's somewhere around, I think, $27 billion. We also have a large health plan as part of UPMC. So cover, I believe, all of Pennsylvania and maybe a few parts of a few other states. My role is I'm responsible for information security. And really, frankly, what we found is that security and privacy are becoming more and more merged. And so I'm also responsible for privacy. And frankly, you can't really do either without really being responsible as well for data governance, which is a big part of my job too. I think if you look back a few years when the Office of Civil Rights was doing their audits, one of the things they found was that a lot of organizations weren't doing an adequate risk assessment. And the reason why they weren't doing an adequate risk assessment is because they didn't know where their data was at. So if people ask, well, why do I do data governance? It's because of that. You have to know where your data assets are in order to be able to appropriately secure them and then overlay appropriate privacy principles as well. So it's really a merged function that is together just because of that.
Very good. Now, John, are you essentially the CISO, or is there a CISO I'm not aware of?
No, I am the CISO.
Okay, just a title thing.
I guess I'm bucking the trend in titles. So
you don't want to just add it on, throw a little acronym in there?
Well, I guess I could, but to me, the title works for me.
Okay, very good. All right, I'm going to
actually, if you think about it, at the end of the day, if something bad happens, they know who to come to anyway, regardless of the title.
But I did see, if I'm incorrect, the health plan has a CISO. Is that correct?
Yes, the health plan has somebody that does mostly application level security.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to misstate his responsibilities, but he works and they work closely with us.
Mm-hmm.
My team, if you think about it in terms of function, my team does infrastructure security mostly. We do work then with the application teams to ensure that their applications are secure as well. But my team stands up a lot of the security infrastructure that's necessary to ensure that we have appropriate security at UPMC. And then we work then with the different groups like the health plan, like our application developers and integrators and the like, to make sure then that at the application layer, we have appropriately security embedded as well.
So interesting. So you talked about the importance of the connection between security and privacy, obviously, and then security and data governance. Yep. Can you talk to me about, and there's a lot of, again, titles. There's a lot of titles out there. There's chief data officers. There's directors of data. There's all these kind of folks. Tell me about your relationship with the folks who lead data governance and data management.
Well, I look at it this way. I mean, my team is really ultimately responsible for understanding where our data resides and where it's going. And as we move more and more to the cloud, understanding where data is going is even more important. And so we're really focused on working with the different individuals throughout the organization who are responsible for deciding where that data goes, working with the applications themselves to make sure we understand what their data management plans are, where they're sending data, things of that sort. Make sure we have appropriate approvals when somebody on the business side decides they want to send data somewhere. Our data governance program really is based around this notion that we have information owners in the different areas, and those information owners are ultimately responsible for making a decision about whether a data should go to a particular destination, or if somebody needs to use it for some purpose, they have to sign off on that purpose. So we have a chief, medical information officer who really ultimately is the person that makes a call when it comes to clinical data. Our
So,
CFO is responsible for financial data.
mhm.
So they would ultimately either directly or somebody that they appoint to fill that role as a data steward would make the decision whether a request to send data somewhere is going to be honored.
So they're making the decision of based on clinical need or business need where they want the data to go. You need to be brought into that process to make sure that that is a secure arrangement, that the destination is secure. And does that fall under sort of the third party risk management? So go
It
ahead.
does. It,
Yeah,
it it absolutely does as well. But you think of it this way: we're the ones that need to make sure that that approval occurs before the decision is made to actually send the data, and
right.
then to make sure that we have a secure environment in which we are going to send the data. I'd also add that we also, as part of our function, have a third-party risk management function as well. And in that regard, we do a lot of work to understand the security posture of those third parties who we're sending our data to. And I will tell you that is a enormous challenge. That's an area of focus for me for the last probably 3 or 4 years. It's one that's we're spending a lot of effort on, but it's one where we see an enormous amount of risk. And in fact, I did a presentation at the end of last week, and I asked for a show of hands. How many organizations had a risk within or a breach within their organization, and there was basically no show of hands. But when you asked the question, well, how many of you have had a third party that's had a breach? About everybody raised their hands. So that's a huge area of concern and a huge area of focus is third party risk.
So many things connect to each other here between the,
Yep.
the security, the privacy, the data. I've also heard quite a bit people talking about the merging, in essence, if not technically, of the CISO and CTO roles because of the connections there between patching and things like that.
Sure.
What are your thoughts around that?
Well, it's interesting because my boss has a sort of a CTO responsibility role, and he and I obviously work quite closely, and he his span of responsibility is all of our infrastructure, security, things of that sort. So it's important that there be the ability to combine security with the other functional areas to make sure that we do have a broad-based, effective, integrated security program. So I guess to answer your question, I think it's incredibly important that you have a technology leader aligned with your security leader. There's a lot more, though, I will say this, to security than simply applying technologies. I
Hmm.
think sometimes CISOs get caught up in trying to solve everything with security. The old adage, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of effort that goes into, again, things like governance, third-party risk programs. Um, so yes, technology is incredibly important to having a secure environment, but as I think I said before, a secure environment's not everything. When the vast majority of your data is out with third parties somewhere in the cloud, multiple copies of very sensitive data, you have to rely upon others, and part of that then is having a robust third party risk and security program, which is very little of it's based around technology, or can be, because you're really dependent upon their technology, not yours. I don't know if
Right.
that makes.
No, it does. It does. A lot of the hardest, thorniest challenges around security or with anything come down to humans and change or getting them to do or not do certain things. Huge areas of risk. You talk about the third parties, but also every single user you have with a login in your
Yep.
system, right? So you need to create that culture of security. Let's take that first. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
around what security leaders can or should be doing to create that culture and the proper mindset Because if you don't have that, all the tools in the world aren't going to help you, right?
I have a number of people that all they are is focused on education and awareness. And we do a lot of work in that area, not just our end users, but our technology staff as well. On a biweekly basis, we have a Teams call where we talk about current threats, current challenges in security, and it's open to anybody who wants to attend within UPMC. And we have hundreds of people that attend that call. It's not mandatory. It's open to all staff, and that's a way of raising awareness in IT by example. But we have all sorts of campaigns that we do. We do annual training, to try to raise awareness. At the end of the day, though, there's still a balance between end user awareness and putting technology controls in place to prevent people from doing stupid things. Because it's amazing what people will do. Unfortunately.
So it's a combination, but if anything, don't you think that CISOs probably shy away from that stuff and sort of go more to their comfort zone of tools, and that maybe
no?
No?
I mean, I guess if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. That's why a CISO has to have a broader understanding than just technologies and tools. They need to understand, the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to say to me, what is my most important initiative, it's around third-party risk, as I said before. And third-party risk, yes, somebody's got to be applying tools, but it's not us that's doing the application of tools. What we're doing is trying to make sure we're doing an appropriate assessment and evaluation of our third parties and ensuring that they have adequate security. That's all around process. We are also really focused on ensuring that we are using a security framework to guide our program. We use HITRUST. We're HITRUST certified. And I think that that's incredibly important as well, is making sure that you're applying a framework and you're doing it in a mature fashion. And by doing so, you're addressing new risks, because as the security frameworks mature or evolve, as
Mm-hmm.
new risks evolve, those frameworks evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And then by applying them, you're able to keep up with those risks and those trends.
So let's talk a little bit about HITRUST and this new entity you're working with, H3PT.
Yes.
So now with HITRUST, any entity can be HITRUST certified. UPMC can be HITRUST certified. Vendors,
we've gone through the process. We've been using HITRUST as a framework for many, many years,
mm-hmm.
probably 8 or 10 years now. And we were originally doing our own self-certification using our internal audit staff. A number of years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we started to use an outside auditor that was was themselves certified to do HITRUST assessments.
Right.
And so we now use them to do an external, independent review of our HITRUST program, so that we can be formally certified by HITRUST, the organization. And we've actually just finished this round of HITRUST certification. So we do that both at the infrastructure layer and then at the application layer for about a dozen or so applications within our portfolio.
Now, HITRUST embodies the principle, and tell me if I'm incorrect. HITRUST embodies the principles of NIST, but goes beyond it. And you cannot get certified by NIST, but you can be certified by HITRUST, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And what HITRUST tried to do is, it started in healthcare. And so what it tried to do is build a framework applicable to healthcare, included NIST, ISO, actually took a lot of the principles out of HIPAA itself for regulatory compliance. But what it tried to do is build a framework that was applicable to a healthcare entity. So it sort of took, I don't want to say the best from all worlds, but it took the most applicable requirements and standards from wherever and tried to build out a framework would apply to healthcare. So yes, you have ISO, you have NIST, you apply some of the HIPAA regulations to it as well to make sure you're meeting those. So it's really intended to be a sort of a one-stop shop for security within healthcare.
I got one more for you. Tell me how this fits in. SOC 2 Type 2. Where does that fit into the picture here?
As part of our HIPAA program and our HIPAA certification, we do end up with a SOC 2 Type 2 as well. The problem with SOC 2 Type 2s are that they're only as good as the way that they're scoped.
Okay.
So I've seen SOC 2 Type 2s that are incredibly thorough, incredibly good, and you can really hang your hat on them. Some other ones that they're not worth the paper they're printed on. And so I think it really all depends upon scoping and the actual particular SOC 2 Type 2. The value of HITRUST to me is that, and we, by the way, are really pushing our large third parties that hold our data to be HITRUST certified. The value of that is that everything goes, even though independent assessors can be from a variety of different firms, in order to be certified, they have to send their work papers to HITRUST. And there's a rigorous quality assurance process to make sure that the assessment itself was sufficient in order to be relied upon for a certification. So when I see a certification from a third party, I know what they've gone through. I know the time they've spent, and I can feel comfortable that they have a good, mature security program. Now, let's be clear about this. In the old days, I used to send out a questionnaire to my third parties, and they'd fill it out and they'd send it back. On a scale of 1 to 10, my level of comfort was maybe a 2, maybe a 3. And that's not because my staff was bad, but because sending out a bunch of questions and relying upon them is fundamentally a flawed concept.
Yes. Yes.
If I see an organization's got HITRUST certification, I figure it's not perfect, but it's a 7 or an 8.
And also, they're not giving it to themselves, correct? Some outside entity is
it's an independent assessor that's been certified by HITRUST.
So that's why it's different than a questionnaire as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you could argue the same thing about a SOC 2 Type 2, but HITRUST, everything gets submitted to a central organization, which is HITRUST, the organization, and they verify and ensure that assessment was appropriately performed. So again, it's not perfect, but if I'm going from a 2 to a 3 to a 7 or an 8, that's a big jump in confidence.
Huge.
And so that's why we prefer to see HITRUST certifications. We feel much more comfortable, and we can rely much more on that certification and as a good housekeeping seal of approval for that organization's security program.
So you've used the phrases, we prefer to see, we are pushing. You have not you've not said that we require HITRUST certification for any vendor that is going to be doing business with UPMC. Why are we not doing that?
Well, only recently has HITRUST come up with a more tiered program. The problem with HITRUST, especially for smaller organizations, is it's expensive. It's also time consuming. So yes, we are pushing hard to get people to be HITRUST certified. We're also working with other organizations, and they're pushing their vendors hard to be HITRUST certified. And really the hope is by a group of healthcare providers really pushing hard to get HITRUST certification, we move the industry. And I'm increasingly seeing more and more organizations that are HITRUST certified, or are saying to us as we're negotiating with them to acquire their services, oh yes, we're going through HITRUST now. We'll have our certification within 6 months. But it is a bit of a journey. So we're really trying to move the industry. And I think we're being successful at that, just based upon, anecdotal evidence.
So it sounds like it would not work from a business point of view for you to put that absolute requirement in place. Too many vendors, too many applications that your users would want to use would be too small or just getting started, and it just wouldn't work. You're
correct, though. Again, HITRUST has just come out with a tiered program that's much easier for smaller vendors to use.
Okay.
and and apply. We can't say a hard no or hard, you absolutely must have high trust certification or we're not going to do business with you, but we are going to push you really hard to become high trust certified. It is a consideration. And if we are dealing with two vendors or we're negotiating with two vendors or considering two vendors, one of which has high trust certification and one that does not, there's a pretty good likelihood we're going to go to the one that has it. And that has happened. I will tell you that has happened. So, it's not a veiled threat that we're making. But and again, I think I see the industry's moving. And I'm pleasantly surprised that some of the vendors come back and say, oh yes, we're working on high trust right now. And I assume they would say, no, we're not, but they are, or they have it. It's becoming increasingly common.
All right, let's talk about Health 3PT. Tell me what this entity is, what you can tell me about who's running it or organizing it, and why you felt something like this was important for you to get involved in. What needed to go beyond sort of the pro high trust stance you're taking? Why did you need something else? What else does this serve?
First of all, it's a consortium of organizations like UPMC that have come together to say, listen, we need to have better understanding of our third party security. And so we're all of the same mind that high trust is the appropriate vehicle for that purpose. And so feeling that any one of us, if we tried to go to our vendor community and said, you need to be high trust certified, we would get some level of support, some level of compliance. We recognize if we went out as a consortium and all pushed our vendors to be high trust certified, that we'd have much more success. And again, I think that's happening. And as I said before, it's really good when you go to negotiate with a new vendor, a new third party you haven't dealt with before, and you ask about high trust, and they either say they have it or they're working on it, because that means that somebody else has convinced them to do it. And so I think this idea of having a consortium that's pushing the industry has been successful, and that's really what the purpose of the council really is.
Let's talk a little bit more about your third-party risk management program, what this all ties to. I've heard nightmare stories from people about trying to get their arms around this. People that are dealing with the regular inflow of requests from the business for new vendors they want to work with is a process everyone's working to get their arms around. People are also being tasked with, oh yeah, in addition to dealing with that flow that's not stopping, that's coming in, if not accelerating, we want you to go back and re-tier the 1,000, 1,500 vendors that you currently work with the new criteria. So have fun with that and get back to me very soon. I mean, I've heard this is just eating people alive. I wonder what you could tell me about your program, what you like about it, and just your advice that you could give to other CISOs who are maybe struggling with this.
Great question. I have a team of people that's focused on third-party risk. And we use a number of tools in order to assess risk of third parties. And we also have an annual process. So if you're a current vendor that we use today, you on an annual basis are going to be required to submit to our process. If you're a new vendor, you're going to be required to submit as well. So I think the biggest challenge is understanding who all those vendors, those third parties are. And again, that's one of the reasons why our data governance function is so important, is because it helps us understand, especially for our current group of vendors and third parties, we can see where our data is going through our data governance functions, and we can watch for outbound flows of data and the like, so that we can get a sense on, potentially who should be part of our program. But finding all of those third parties it can be a challenge. You got to work with supply chain, during, as new vendors are being considered, uh, work with the other teams within IT to try to identify where other vendors might be. We work, as I said, our data governance team really watches for outbound data traffic, but it also works with our electronic file transfer team to understand where they're sending data, to get a sense on who these third parties are. So trying to corral them all can be a bit of a challenge. Don't get me wrong. And then you've got to try to figure out how to organize and manage all that and get good data about them, and keep that data up to date so you understand what your potential risk profile is there. Because I will tell you, there's a number of things that happen. First of all, these third parties that we use, often they change the type of services they provide. So, you're say, by example, you're working with a third party and you're sending, 50,000 patient records a year to them for a particular service. And all of a sudden your business decides you're going to add a service and it goes from 50,000 to 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Or it goes from 10,000 to 50,000 or whatever. So often the service offerings that these vendors provide changes.
Mm-hmm.
Things that you acquired that were run within your data center on-prem, now all of a sudden are now cloud-based. And who told us? We may not even know that changed. So we have to, we at least on an annual basis want to try to understand, what's going on with that particular third party. We also at UPMC have an enterprise architecture process. So any new application, whether it be in the cloud or on premises, that is being considered for use at UPMC has to go through an enterprise architecture review. And part of the enterprise architecture review is the security review. So we're also trying to catch, new third parties coming into our environment through our enterprise architecture review. And we're trying to couple that as well with what our supply chain does. So supply chain's pretty good about, before they consider any new IT vendor, it's got to go through our enterprise architecture review and our security review. So they're good partners with us in that regard.
So would you say it's sort of a two-pronged approach, or it should be? One is, ideally, we've created a process and a culture where people considering new applications understand that these need to be submitted to IT and security in order for proper reviews to take place in a timely fashion, and they come to you. So that's the ideal. But we also understand that either we're not there yet, or maybe we'll never be there 100%. And therefore, we're going to put all these nets in different places. We're going to detect data movement. We're going to detect purchasing. We're going to do things like that, so that when someone has not come to us ahead of time, we find out about it after the fact. We don't love it, but we still find out about it. And then we remediate. Then we go have that conversation and say, oh, by the way, you didn't remember to come to us, so now we need to take a look at it.
I think that's a great way to summarize our program. First and foremost, we wanted to go through enterprise architecture review early because we really want to get through and perform the enterprise architecture review before we make a decision to go with that particular third party. We want to make sure there aren't any issues, not just with respect to security, but with respect to the architecture of the offering. We want to make sure there already isn't something in our portfolio products that already does that.
Right.
So the earlier on that we go through enterprise architecture review, the more likely that we're going to make a good decision from not just a technology perspective, from a business perspective. However, if it gets the whole way to our supply chain review or process and then comes to our attention, okay, we would prefer that it be earlier, but if it happens then, it happens then. And as I said, we partner very well with supply chain to make sure that enterprise architecture review is performed, and they'll bring things to our attention as well.
I mean, it's amazing how the connections of things. You brought up the application rationalization process and how important that is today in tighter margins, We don't want to
Mhm.
have 7 apps to do the same thing. It doesn't make sense financially. It doesn't make sense from a security point of view.
No,
It's all connected. And that also is now involving the CISO, where they need to have a role and a voice, not ultimately making the decision of which of the 3 apps is going to stay, but in the process and driving towards that desired outcome, right?
sure. Yeah, I would say that a lot of times I fill the role of an influencer,
Hmm.
and often, or it's not uncommon that I'll get involved because of, of security, but I'll bring up other considerations like, hey, has this gone through enterprise architecture review? You know, have you talked to such and such about this? What, you know, or, you know, sometimes I'll even know, aren't we using product X for this already? Um, so I will, it is not uncommon for me to direct people to others within the organization when something is brought to my attention because of security. Um, it really is a team effort. And my peers do the same thing. You know, if they see something happening and they think security hasn't been adequately engaged, you know, they'll send an email off to me or give me a call or pull in one of my architects. But we're pretty good about policing and helping each other out in that respect.
Wow. A lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. We're almost out of time. I just want to see if there's anything else I want to run by you. I guess as a final question, you've been there 25, 26 years.
Long time, yeah.
You got a lot of what I'd call gravitas in the organization. I'm sure you have a voice people listen to. Do you have any advice for someone who may be newer to the role, either just starting or a few years in, how to be an effective security leader when you're fairly new, how to get um, people to trust you, that you're not an impediment to business, that you're here to help the business? You need to do certain things, but you're not a roadblock. I would imagine that's sort of what you want to get across.
I wouldn't say that I have gravitas. I think I have respect, both
Uh,
within IT and outside of IT. And I know many people in the organization, so I know how to to engage
right.
as necessary, to when there are security issues or you know, concerns, you know, about, you know, new application or whatever that we're trying to pull into the environment. Um, but if I had, you know, if I had one piece of advice to a new CISO, uh, it's going to be that you can't ever say no. You can say that's not going to work the way you have it designed, but here's, I think, how we can solve the problem. You want to come up with you want to help the business individual figure out how to solve the business problem, and it may not be the way they envision. Um, so that's what you really need to be focused on, is trying to get them to a solution that works for them and works for security as well. Um, you know, it's that's really, to me, the most important thing. Sometimes, yeah, you really do have to put your foot down and say, listen, guys, this is dangerous. But then you want to sort of hold out the olive branch, say, but what are you trying to achieve here? And let me see if we can work with you on this. And I will also tell you, there have been times where I've said, listen, this is a problem.
Hmm.
Um, and you find out that the executive business leader, when they find out about it, they say, I agree with John. We're not doing this, or you know, unless John says it's okay, I'm not moving forward. And I've had that happen on a lot of occasions. So, you know, it's respect. I think there's a lot of respect you want to try to build within the leadership team of your organization, and then help to try to solve problems in a secure fashion.
And would you say people get it now more than they used to, with all the public breaches and hospitals being down for weeks and a month and the costs? I mean, the general public has a better sense, or the general user base has a better sense of what's at stake?
I think most do.
Hmm.
Some still, I think, are so focused on trying to get their business done that they lose sight of the risk.
Hmm.
And as an attorney as well, I really hadn't said it before, but I get involved in most of our IT negotiations. That's one of my responsibilities.
Hmm.
And so, you know, during the negotiating process, I will often get involved in fairly difficult negotiations around things like limitation of liability for a security breach and things of that sort. And so, you really sometimes going through a legal negotiation, you're actually often educating the user at that point in time when they don't even recognize some of the issues associated with what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I literally about 3 weeks ago got done with a negotiation, and the person said to me, "Listen, I really appreciate you being involved. I really didn't understand what some of these risks really were until I sat in on some of the negotiating and, saw how you pressed them on some things." So I think it's important to understand that all I'm trying to do is mitigate risk. I'm not trying to get
Right.
rid of preventing the business from doing what it needs to do. But everything, there's an old saying, everything's fine until it's not. And it's great. And, but all of a sudden you've got a big, ugly issue, and everybody's looking around the room asking a question, well, who the hell let this happen?
Right. Right. Brilliant. Brilliant. John, I could keep you another hour, but I won't. Thank you so much for your
Sure.
time today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks.